Imagine a manila envelope sitting in a kitchen drawer for 47 years. The wax is still red at the edges. The seal is still pressed. The room has changed around it, the wallpaper yellowed, the linoleum cracked, but the envelope never moved. Nobody in the family knew what was inside, not the mother, not the father, not the aunt. Only the woman who sealed it, and the lawyer who held it, and a grandson who had been alive for less than a year when she walked into the office and asked him to lock it away. If you like true stories about family secrets that take decades to surface, settle in. We have an hour together, and I want to walk with you through this one from start to finish. The woman at the center of it is named Marisol Esparza. She is 28. Her grandmother, Lupe Esparza, died this past March, and when the will was read, an envelope that had been sealed since 1977 was waiting with her name on it. The lawyer told her the envelope had not been opened in 47 years. He told her it was for her, and only her. Then he slid it across the desk. The rest of this hour is what Marisol did with that envelope, what she found, who she found, and the revenge her grandmother had been keeping alive for nearly half a century, sealed in red wax, waiting for the right person to break it open. I'll let her take it from here. Before we go any further, I want to set a few expectations. This is not a story that resolves in a satisfying way. The boy does not come home. The grandmother is already gone. The mother does not learn the truth, at least not yet. The father does not learn the truth. The aunt does not learn the truth. The lawyer, who has been holding the envelope for 47 years, does not get to tell anyone what he knows. The story I am about to share with you is about a quiet, lifelong act of revenge, and the woman who finally got to see it through, and the granddaughter who has been asked to carry it. I want to ask you one thing before we start, and I want you to leave the answer in the comments. If you had a grandmother who had been afraid of something her whole life, and you found out after she died what it was, would you want to know? Or would you rather have kept the not knowing? Hold that question. We will come back to it later. My grandmother died in March. She was 91, I was 28, and I was the only grandchild who still visited her every week. The others had drifted. Cousins got married, moved to Phoenix, had their own lives, their own Sunday routines. I drove to Lupe's house every week with a bag of pan dulce and a thermos of coffee that I brewed too strong. We sat at her kitchen table, and she told me the same stories I had heard since I was small. About my grandfather, who died when I was 4. About the church socials in the 70s. About her mother, who braided hair on Saturdays for extra money. She called me Mija. She called me that even when I was 27. The will was read in April. The lawyer's office was on the 3rd floor of a building downtown. Beige carpet, framed diplomas on the wall. The kind of place that smells like other people's decisions. Mr. Haggerty had been my grandmother's lawyer since before I was born. He had kind eyes and slow hands. He read the will in that flat professional voice that lawyers use when they want to be gentle, and I sat across from him in a wooden chair and tried not to cry. My mother Yolanda was on my right. My father Reuben was next to her. My aunt Consuelo was on my left. Nobody said much. Lupe had left 3 things to me. The first was her rosary. The second was her sewing box, the wooden one with the little drawers. The third was a folded manila envelope sealed with red wax. When Mr. Haggerty got to the 3rd item, he paused. He set the paper down. He looked at me over the tops of his glasses, the way he used to when I was 9, and asked him a question during the reading of my grandfather's will. He said, "This envelope has been in my office safe for 47 years. It was sealed by your grandmother in 1977. It is to be opened by you, and only you. I am instructed not to be present when it is opened. I am instructed not to discuss its contents with you, your parents, or your aunt. The instructions are written in her own hand and signed by her." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "It means that whatever is in this envelope is for you to discover, on your own, in your own time." He slid it across the desk. The envelope was heavier than paper should be. The wax was cracked at the corners, but still holding the color of dried blood. The letter L was pressed deep into the red, and below the L, the year was carved in crooked numbers. 1977. I put the envelope in my purse. I did not open it in the car. I did not open it at home. I did not open it that night, or the next morning, or the next Sunday. The rosary went around my neck the same day. I haven't taken it off since. I held that envelope for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is not a long time. 3 weeks is nothing, if you say it fast. But 3 weeks with a sealed envelope that your grandmother sealed 47 years ago and that her lawyer was told not to discuss with your parents is a long time. The first thing I did was put it in the freezer. I do not know why. I think I wanted to be sure it was real. I wanted to feel it cold in my hand, the wax sharp, the paper stiff. I put it in the back of the freezer behind a bag of frozen peas and a tub of vanilla ice cream. I left it there for 2 days. When I took it out, the wax had a thin film of frost on it. I held the envelope and watched the frost melt into the paper. I put it back. The second thing I did was put it in the dishwasher. I ran it on a normal cycle with the dishes from dinner. I thought, if it survives this, I am meant to open it. If it does not, I will not. When the cycle finished, the envelope was wet through. The wax was peeling at the edges. I panicked. I took a towel and pressed it dry, carefully, like I was drying a baby. The wax came off in small red crumbs. I picked them up from the counter and put them in a saucer. I still have that saucer. The third thing I did was put it in the glove box of my Civic. I drove to work with it there. I drove to the grocery store with it there. I drove to my parents' house on Sunday with it there. I sat in their driveway for 15 minutes looking at the kitchen window, watching my mother move between the counter and the table. I did not go in. I drove home. I put the envelope back in the glove box. I called my mother twice in those 3 weeks and I told her nothing. I called my Aunt Consuelo once and I told her nothing. I called Mr. Haggerty's office twice, and the receptionist told me, in the polite voice she used for everyone, that Mr. Sir Haggerty was not allowed to discuss the contents of the envelope with me, and that I should open it when I was ready. I asked her, "How will I know when I am ready?" She said, "You will know." She was wrong. I did not know. I thought about my grandmother a lot in those 3 weeks. I thought about her hands. I thought about the way she always carried a small handkerchief in her sleeve. Even at home, even in the kitchen, I thought about the way she looked out the window when she thought nobody was watching. I had asked her once when I was maybe 12 what she was looking at. She said, "Nothing, mija. I was just looking." I did not believe her then. I do not believe her now. She was looking at something. I will never know what. I thought about the fear. Lupe had been afraid of something her whole life. I never knew what. My mother did not know. My father did not know. My Aunt Consuelo, who had known Lupe longer than anyone alive, did not know. It was not a fear of storms, or of dogs, or of doctors. It was something else, something behind her face, the kind of fear that lives in the body and never really leaves. I would see it sometimes when she thought I had gone to the bathroom, when she thought I was not looking. Her shoulders would go up. Her hand would go to her mouth. Then I would come back into the room and she would be smiling and asking me if I wanted more coffee. I did not know what she was afraid of. The envelope sat in the freezer, in the dishwasher, in the glove box, in the drawer by my bed. I think I was waiting for permission. I think I was waiting for the fear to go away. It did not go away. I opened the envelope anyway. Before I tell you about the Sunday I opened the envelope, I want to tell you a little about Lupe. Not the kitchen table Lupe, the one I visited on Sundays, the younger Lupe, the Lupe of 1977. She was 24 when she married my grandfather. She was 25 when my father was born. She was 26, 27, 28 in the years I am talking about, the years the letter was sealed. She lived in a small house on the south side of Albuquerque with my grandfather and my father, and for a while with her mother, who was a strict Catholic woman who had survived the Depression and who did not believe in divorce and did not believe in secrets, and who, my mother once told me, would have considered a child born out of wedlock a sin against God and a stain on the family name. I did not know any of this when Lupe was alive. I learned it from my Aunt Consuelo, years later, on a Sunday afternoon, in the same kitchen. My aunt was drinking coffee, and I was asking her about the family, and she said, "Your grandmother was a different woman before your grandfather died. She was harder," Consuelo said. "She was more afraid. She was afraid of her mother mostly. She was afraid of being seen. She was afraid of what would happen if anyone found out." "Found out what?" I asked. Consuelo looked at me for a long time. She said, "I do not know, mija." She said, "Your grandmother never told me." She said, "I have spent my whole life wondering." That conversation happened years before the envelope was opened. I did not know when Consuelo said it that the question I was asking was the right question. I thought I was asking about the family in general, in the way you ask your elders about the family. I was not. I was asking about the envelope. I was asking about 1977. I was asking about a boy. I opened it on a Sunday in Lupe's kitchen with the rosary around my neck. The house was empty. My parents were at Mass. My aunt was at her own house. I had told them I was going to the gym. I had not been to the gym in 2 years. I I sat at the kitchen table where Lupe and I had sat every Sunday for my entire life. I set the envelope on the table. The wax was already cracked from the dishwasher. I did not need to break it. I just needed to lift the flap. I sat there for a long time. The refrigerator hummed, the clock above the stove ticked. The neighborhood was quiet in the way it always is on Sunday morning, when everyone is at church and the only cars on the street are parked. I held the envelope in my hand. I thought, if I open this, I will know what she was afraid of. I thought, if I open this, I cannot unknow it. I opened it. Inside, there was one piece of paper, a single sheet, folded twice, written in a small, slanted hand. The ink was blue, the paper was yellow at the edges. The letter was dated October 14, 1977. It was addressed to my grandmother. The signature at the bottom was Eulalia Mendez. I read the letter 3 times before I could understand it. Then I read it a 4th time. Then I sat with it on my lap and looked at the kitchen window for a long time, the same window my grandmother had looked out of when she thought I was not watching. The letter said, "Lupe, the boy is yours. I have given him the name of his father. He is safe. I will not write again. Forget me." The letter was 3 lines long. There was no address at the top. There was no envelope the letter had come in, just the letter itself, folded twice, slid into the manila envelope sealed with the red wax. The wax had Lupe's maiden initial pressed into it, and the year. I understood in that moment that the envelope was the envelope the letter had arrived in, and that Lupe had never opened that outer envelope either. She had kept the letter sealed inside, with the wax still on, for 47 years. The only thing she had done in all the time was carry the envelope from the lawyer's safe to her kitchen drawer, and from her kitchen drawer to her kitchen drawer, every week, for nearly half a century. I had watched her do it. I had not known what I was watching. "The boy is yours." I set the letter on the table. I stood up, I sat back down. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the thermos I had brought, and the coffee was cold. I drank it anyway. I sat with the letter until my parents came home from Mass. I told them I had been doing some cleaning. I drove home. I locked the letter in the drawer by my bed, next to the empty manila envelope, and I did not sleep that night. "The boy is yours," the name of his father. "He's safe. I will not write again. Forget me." I read the letter again in the morning. I read it at lunch. I read it on my couch, in my kitchen, in the parking lot of the grocery store. I read it until the words stopped being words and started being a fact about my family that I could not take back. I had no uncle. My father had no brother. My mother had no brother-in-law. There had been no other child in the family, no one who had moved away, no one who had been sent to live with relatives. But Lupe had a son, born in 1977, given to a nun, named for his father. The rosary I was wearing around my neck had been the only thing the nun had asked for in return. I looked at the rosary. I had been wearing it for 3 weeks. I had been wearing it on and off since I was a child, when Lupe would put it over my head before Mass and take it back after. I had worn it for decades. I had never counted the beads. I should tell you what I did with the letter in the days after I read it. I read it so many times that I had the wording memorized. I could recite it, even now in the dark. I kept the letter in the manila envelope, and the manila envelope in the fireproof box, and the fireproof box in the closet of my bedroom, behind a stack of sweaters I never wore. I did not want to look at it, and I did not want to lose it, and those 2 things together meant I locked it away and visited it once a day, the way you visit a relative in the hospital. I went to Lupe's house twice that week. I told my mother I was checking on the pipes. I went through the sewing box. There were 3 drawers, all of them full of buttons and thread and small scissors. There was a photograph of my grandfather in a brown frame, smiling at the camera in a way I had never seen him smile. There was a rosary card from 1958, the kind they used to give out at First Communions. There was a small wooden cross, the kind that fits in a pocket. There was nothing about a boy. There was nothing about a nun. There was nothing about 1977. I went through the photo albums. There were 7 of them on the shelf in the hallway, in chronological order. I knew the order because I had been looking at them since I was a child. There were no gaps. There were no missing years. The albums went from my grandfather's wedding in 1968 to my own first communion in 2005, with no skipped pages, no empty sleeves, no photographs missing. Whoever had curated these albums had been very careful, and I was beginning to understand why. I went through Lupe's clothes. I went through the kitchen drawers. I went through the small cabinet in the hallway where she kept the candles and the matches. I did not find the other rosary. I did not find any other letters. I did not find a birth certificate or a baptismal record or any document that would confirm what the letter had said. Whoever had put the secret together in 1977 had done it carefully, and whoever had kept it together for 47 years had done it more carefully still. There was no second piece of evidence. There was only the letter, and the rosary around my neck, and the empty envelope in the fireproof box. I sat on the edge of my bed that night and I counted the beads. I went slowly. I did not want to miscount. I did not want to think I had miscounted. I wanted the number to be what I thought it was, and I was afraid it would not be. The rosary was old. The chain was tarnished at the clasp. The crucifix was small, the kind Lupe had carried in her pocket when I was small, before she started wearing the rosary around her neck when she got too weak to dig in her sleeve for it. The beads were wooden, most of them dark with age. I counted them one by one, 53. A standard rosary has 53 beads, if you count the way the church counts the 5 decades plus the connecting beads. I knew this because my grandmother had taught me how to pray the rosary when I was 7, and she had corrected me when I tried to skip the last bead of each decade. I counted again, 53. Then I looked at the chain. The 54th bead was not wooden. It was a small black onyx, polished smooth, set into the chain where a bead should not have been. It had been soldered into the chain, the join almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I had worn it for decades and never noticed. I had worn it through my confirmation. I had worn it to college. I had worn it on every visit to Lupe's house for years. I had never noticed. I held the onyx bead between my thumb and my forefinger. It was cold. It was heavier than the wooden beads. It was the same temperature as the envelope had been when I had taken it out of the freezer. I set the rosary on the dresser. I looked at the letter. I looked at the rosary. I looked at the empty manila envelope, the wax peeled, the red crumbs still in the saucer. I thought, she split it. I did not know why yet. I did not know how. But I knew, sitting on the edge of my bed at 11 o'clock at night, that the rosary I was wearing was not the whole rosary. There was another rosary somewhere, and it had a 54th bead, and that 54th bead was not onyx. I called the diocese in Albuquerque the next morning. I did not have a plan. I had a letter signed by a woman named Eulalia Mendez, dated October 14, 1977, who claimed she was a nun. I figured the diocese would be a place to start. The receptionist was polite. She asked me my name. She asked me the nature of my inquiry. I said, I am trying to locate a nun who served in the area in the late 1970s. Her name was Eulalia Mendez. The receptionist put me on hold for 6 minutes. When she came back, she gave me a number for a parish in Las Cruces. I called the parish. A priest answered. I told him the same thing. He put me on hold for 10 minutes. When he came back, he said the diocese had a record of a Sister Eulalia Mendez who had served at a mission outside Las Cruces in the late 70s and early 80s. He said she had taken a leave of absence in 1982 for health reasons. He gave me a name of a retirement home in El Paso. He said, you should call them. I do not know if she is still alive, but they would know. I called the retirement home. A woman answered. I told her I was looking for Sister Eulalia Mendez. She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice was different. She said, Sister Eulalia passed in 2019. I am sorry. I said, did she have any family? The woman said, she had a file. The file said she had no living family. I said, did she have a son? There was a long silence. The woman said, who is this? I said, my name is Marisol Esparza. My grandmother left me a letter from Sister Eulalia. The letter is dated October 14, 1977. The letter is about a boy. The woman did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, hold on, please. I held. I listened to a clock ticking on the other end. I listened to someone walking past a phone. I listened to a door close. Then the woman came back. She said, the boy is alive. His name is Esteban. He's in his mid-40s. He teaches math at a high school in El Paso. He was told his whole life that his mother was a widow from Texas and that he had been adopted privately. He never knew his mother was a nun. He never knew his father was Lupe's husband. I did not say anything. The woman said, would you like his number? I said, yes. She gave it to me. I wrote it on the back of the letter. I hung up the phone. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. The man the letter was about had been alive for 47 years, in the same state, an hour and a half from where I lived. He had been teaching math. He had been adopted by a widow, or told he had been, and he had grown up in El Paso and become a math teacher and lived a quiet life. And my grandmother had known. My grandmother had known the whole time. She had been afraid the whole time, and she had known. The rosary I was wearing around my neck had been the price. I called the number. It rang 4 times. Then a voice said, "Hello." It was a man's voice, mid-range, unhurried. I said, "My name is Marisol Esparza. I am calling about a letter my grandmother left me. The letter is from a woman named Lalia Mendez. The letter is about you." There was a long silence. The man said, "I think you have the wrong number." I said, "I do not." The man said, "Who is Eulalia Mendez?" I said, "She was a nun. She died in 2019. She wrote a letter to my grandmother in 1977. The letter said, 'The boy is yours.'" The man did not say anything. I said, "I think you are the boy." The man said, "I have to go. I will call you back." He hung up. I set the phone down. I waited. He did not call back that day. He did not call back the next day. I waited a week. I did not call him again. I did not know if I was supposed to. I did not know what the rules were for this. There were no rules for this. I wrote him a letter. I do not know why I wrote it instead of calling. I think I wanted him to have something he could hold. I think I wanted to choose my words carefully. I bought a sheet of stationery at the pharmacy. I sat at the kitchen table. I wrote 3 drafts. I threw 2 of them away. The third one said, "Dear Esteban, my name is Marisol Esparza. I am the granddaughter of Lupe Esparza, who died in March. I have in my possession a letter dated October 14, 1977, signed by a woman named Eulalia Mendez, who identified herself as a nun. The letter said, 'The boy is yours. I have given him the name of his father. He is safe. I will not write again. Forget me. I believe the boy in the letter is you. I am not asking you for anything. I am not trying to disrupt your life. I only wanted you to know that the letter exists and that you can have it if you want it. Sincerely, Marisol Esparza.'" I put the letter in an envelope. I addressed it to Esteban at the high school, where the woman from the retirement home had said he taught. I mailed it on a Tuesday. 2 weeks went by. I did not hear anything. I checked the mail every day. I checked my email. I checked my phone for missed calls. Nothing. I assumed he had decided not to reply. I thought, that is fair. I thought, he is a man in his mid-40s who teaches math in El Paso. He was told his whole life that his mother was a widow. He has a job. He has a life. He has a routine. I would not have replied either, probably. I would have put the letter in a drawer and gone to bed. I was at work one afternoon, 2 weeks after I had mailed the letter, when my phone buzzed. I looked at it. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. There were no words. There was a single photo. The photo was of a rosary. The rosary was laid out on what looked like a wooden desk next to a mug of coffee and a stack of papers. The rosary was old. The chain was tarnished. The beads were wooden, the same dark color as the ones on my grandmother's rosary. I zoomed in on the photo. I counted the beads. I counted them again. 53 wooden beads. And at the bottom of the chain, just before the crucifix, a small white pearl, polished smooth, soldered into the chain the same way the onyx was soldered into mine. I sat at my desk for a long time. I did not say anything to anyone. I stared at the photo. The pearl was the same size as the onyx. The pearl was the same temperature as the onyx. The rosary was the other half of Lupe's. Lupe had split the rosary in 1977 when Esteban was born. She had kept one half. She had given the other half to the nun, who had given it to the boy who had grown up with it, who had worn it for decades, who had looked at it the same way I had looked at mine and never known what it meant. I texted him back. I said, "I see the pearl." He did not reply for a long time. Then he texted, "My mother gave it to me. She said it was a gift from my real parents. She said my real parents wanted me to have it. I never met my real parents. She died when I was in college. I never asked her anything else about it. I always thought it was just a rosary." I texted back, "Mine has a black onyx bead, the 54th bead." He did not reply for a long time. Then he texted, "Mine has a pearl." I asked him, "Did you know what it meant?" He said, "No." I said, "Neither did I." He said, "Are we siblings?" I said, "I think we are." He said, "Do you want to meet?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I am sure." He said, "Next month." He said, "There's a coffee shop on Mesa Street near the university." He said, "I will be there at 10 on a Saturday." He said, "I will be the one with the math textbook on the table." I did not know if he was joking. I smiled anyway. There's something I should tell you about the time between Esteban's text and the day we met. I was not a calm person that month. I was, in the language my mother uses, a mess. I was not sleeping. I was not eating properly. I was going to work and coming home and staring at the wall. I was checking my phone every 10 minutes. I was drafting messages to Esteban and deleting them. I was reading the letter at night, by the light of the lamp on my nightstand, the way you reread something that has not yet become real. I called my mother. I told her I was not feeling well. I told her I had a lot on my mind. She asked me if it was a boy. I said no. She asked me if it was work. I said yes. She told me to take care of myself. I said I would. I hung up the phone. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the rosary on the dresser. I did not pick it up. I did not tell my parents, and I did not tell my aunt, and I did not tell anyone else. The secret was mine, and I was holding it the way Lupe had held it, which is to say, all of it, all of the time in every part of my body, and I was not yet good at it. I will tell you one more thing about the wait, and then we will go to El Paso. I started driving to Lupe's house on Sundays again. I told my mother I missed the kitchen. I told her I wanted to make sure the pipes were still good. She was glad I was coming. She made me coffee. She made me pan dulce. We sat at the table. We did not talk about the envelope. We did not talk about 1977. We did not talk about the rosary. I sat in the chair where Lupe had sat, and I drank my coffee, and I watched the drawer where the envelope had lived, and I did not say a word. We met in El Paso in May. I drove down from Albuquerque on a Friday night and stayed at a hotel near the airport. The kind of place where you can park your car right outside the door and the sheets smell of industrial laundry detergent. I did not sleep well. I lay in the dark and thought about what I was going to say. I thought about what he was going to look like. I thought about the math textbook on the table and whether he was serious and what would happen if he was not who the letter said he was, and what would happen if he was. I got to the coffee shop at 9:45. The shop was on a corner with big windows and a long bar along one wall. The tables were wooden, mismatched. There was a chalkboard menu in cursive. A man in a button-down shirt was sitting at a table in the back with a book open in front of him and a cup of coffee and a glass of water. He had dark hair, graying at the temples. He was reading a textbook. I walked over. He looked up. He smiled. He said, "You are early." I said, "You are too." He said, "I have been here since 9:30. I have been pretending to read." I said, "I have been in the parking lot since 9:20. He laughed and I sat down, and that was it. He was 47. He had my father's build, broad shoulders, narrow hips. He did not have my father's face. He had his mother's chin, the way the woman from the retirement home had said. A small cleft that made him look like he was about to say something, even when he was not. He had his father's hands, which were my grandfather's hands, which were my father's hands, which were the hands I had grown up watching chop onions and change a tire and hold a coffee cup. I looked at his hands and I did not say anything for a long time. He saw me looking. He said, "My father." I said, "Yes." He said, "I do not remember him." I said, "He died before I was born." He said, "My mother told me he died young." She said it was an accident. I said, "I do not think that is what happened." He did not ask me what I thought had happened. He just nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're adding something up that they have suspected for a long time. We sat at the table for 4 hours. We ordered more coffee. We ordered breakfast. He told me about his life in El Paso. He had been married once, in his 30s, and divorced after 3 years. He did not have children. He had been teaching math at a public high school for 18 years. He had a small apartment near the school. He had a cat named Gauss. He had a stack of unread novels on his nightstand. He told me about his mother, the widow from Texas, who had raised him in a house with a fig tree in the backyard, who had taught him how to make tamales, who had died of cancer in 2013. He said, she was a good woman. He said, I loved her. He said, I do not know what to do with this other story. I told him about Lupe. I told him about the kitchen table, the pan dulce, the rosary, the fear I had never been able to name. I told him about the envelope, the wax, the lawyer. I told him about the letter, the 3 lines, the signature. I told him that I had not told my parents. I told him that I did not know if I would. He did not ask to be introduced to my parents. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for the letter, or the rosary, or the empty envelope. He asked one question near the end of the 4th hour after the coffee cups had been taken away and the breakfast plates cleared and the chalkboard menu had been erased and rewritten. He asked, did she suffer? I told him no. I told him she had died in March. I told him she had been 91. I told him she had held my hand. I told him that the last thing she had said to me 2 days before she died was that I was a good girl and that she was proud of me, and that I should not be afraid. He took a long breath. He closed his eyes for a second. He opened them. He thanked me. He said, "I am glad she was not alone." I said, "She was not alone. I was there." He said, "I am glad you were there." He said, "Thank you for telling me." He stood up. He took the textbook off the table. He put it under his arm. He said, "I will walk you to your car." I said, "You do not have to." He said, "I would like to." We walked to the parking lot. He said, "If you want to call me, you can call me." I said, "I would like that." He said, "Take care of yourself, Marisol." I said, "You too, Esteban." He shook my hand. His hand was warm. His hand was my father's hand. He turned and walked away. I watched him walk to a silver pickup truck at the far end of the lot. I watched him get in. I watched him drive away. I sat in my car for a long time. I did not turn the engine on. I did not cry. I did not feel like crying. I felt like I had just been handed something I was not sure I had agreed to carry. But I had agreed to carry it, and I was carrying it, and there was no one to give it back to. I want to tell you about the weeks after the meeting in El Paso, because the weeks after were almost as heavy as the day itself. I drove back to Albuquerque the night we met. I drove the speed limit. I did not play the radio. I did not call anyone. I got home at 9. I sat on the couch. I did not turn the lights on. I sat in the dark and thought about Esteban's hands, which were my father's hands, which were my grandfather's hands. And I thought about the math textbook on the table. And I thought about the way he had said, "I have been pretending to read." And I thought about the way he had laughed, a small laugh, the kind of laugh that does not want to be heard, and I sat there for a long time. The next morning I went to work. I worked the whole day. I came home, I made dinner, I ate it. I cleaned the kitchen. I went to bed. I did the same thing the next day, and the next, and the next. I called Esteban on a Wednesday. He picked up. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. He told me about a student who had aced the math section of a state test. He told me about a recipe he had tried for carne asada that had not worked. He told me the cat was fine. I told him work was busy. I told him I was thinking of planting something on the balcony. He said, "Plant tomatoes, they do well in this climate." I said, "I will." I hung up. I did not say anything about the letter or the rosary or the envelope. I do not know if he wanted to. I do not think he did. I think we were both, in our own ways, carrying the weight of the same secret, and neither of us knew yet what to do with it. I went to Lupe's house the following Sunday. I sat at the kitchen table. I put the envelope back in the drawer where she had kept it for 47 years. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my father. I did not tell my aunt. I drank my coffee. I ate my pan dulce. I watched the clock tick. I went home. Stay with me for a second. I want to slow down here because this is the part of the story I have been thinking about for weeks. A woman named Lupe sealed an envelope in 1977. The envelope contained a single letter. The letter said, "The boy is yours." For 47 years, the envelope sat in a safe, then in a drawer, then in a freezer, then in a dishwasher, then in a glove box, then in a drawer by my bed. Nobody opened it. Nobody in the family knew what was inside. Lupe never told. The nun never wrote again. Esteban never knew. My parents never knew. The secret was a single object on a single kitchen table. And the kitchen table was in a house that was full of people, and nobody knew. That is the kind of secret this was. I have not told my parents. I have not told my Aunt Consuelo. I have not told my cousins. I have thought about it every day since May. I have drafted the conversation in my head 100 times. I imagine sitting my mother down at the kitchen table, the same table where I opened the envelope, and I imagine saying, "Mom, there's something I have to tell you." I imagine the way her face would change. I imagine the way my father would put his coffee cup down very slowly, the way he does when he is about to be serious. I imagine my Aunt Consuelo lighting a cigarette, even though she says she has quit, and asking me to start from the beginning. I have not done any of those things. I keep going back to a line in the letter. The line is, "I will not write again. Forget me." Eulalia wrote that line in 1977 in a small, slanted hand on a single sheet of paper, and she meant it. She never wrote again. She gave the boy to a widow in Texas, or to whoever was supposed to receive him. She kept the rosary for a few years, or she gave it to the widow, or she passed it along. She went back to the diocese or to another diocese. She worked in a parish in Las Cruces, and then she took a leave of absence in 1982, and then she moved to a retirement home in El Paso, and then she died in 2019, and then the woman at the retirement home gave me Esteban's number, and then I drove to El Paso and met him in a coffee shop. And we sat for 4 hours, and he asked me if she had suffered, and I said no. Forget me. I think about that line a lot. I think about what it must have taken to write it. I think about a woman in her 30s or 40s in a habit in a small parish in southern New Mexico in 1977, holding a piece of blue-lined paper, writing 3 lines, folding it twice, putting it in an envelope, sealing it with wax, walking it to a lawyer's office, and saying, "Do not open this," for 47 years. I think about the lawyer, a younger Mr. Haggerty, taking the envelope, putting it in his safe, locking the safe, and not asking any questions. I think about the walk back to the rectory, or to wherever the nun went after, and whether she went straight home or whether she stopped at a chapel on the way and what she prayed for, and whether she prayed at all. I think about Lupe. I think about Lupe, who never told. Lupe, who had a son she gave up, or who was taken from her, and who lived with that for 91 years. Lupe, who was afraid of something her whole life, and who told no one, and who left the secret in an envelope for her granddaughter to open, because her granddaughter was the only one who visited, and because the visit was every Sunday, and because Sunday was the day you rested, and because resting was the day you finally stopped carrying things. I think about revenge. I do not know if that is the right word. I think about the long, quiet revenge of a woman who was told, by her family, by her community, by her church, by her era, that the right thing to do was to give up her son and never speak of it, and who obeyed for 47 years, and who then, in a final act of quiet defiance, sealed the truth in wax and gave it to a lawyer and said, "Give it to the one who comes on Sundays." That is not revenge in the way we usually mean the word. It is not loud. It is not violent. It does not punish anyone. It is the opposite of punishment. It is the act of leaving a record. It is the act of saying, "I was here. He was here. This happened." 47 years is a long time to wait for someone to come on Sundays. I think it is the kind of revenge that only works if no one ever finds out about it. I think it is the kind of revenge that works precisely because it is quiet. I still have the rosary around my neck. The 54th bead is onyx. I touch it sometimes in meetings on the bus when I am not paying attention to what is around me. It is warm from my skin. I have stopped trying to explain to myself what it means. It is a piece of onyx that my grandmother had soldered into a chain in 1977, and that is enough for me. I called Mr. Haggerty last week. I had not called him since April, when I had first asked him about the contents, and he had said, in his careful lawyer voice, that he could not discuss the envelope with me. I did not ask him about the envelope this time. I asked him how he was. He said he was fine. He asked me how I was. I said I was well. He said, "Did you have any other questions about your grandmother's estate?" I said no. He said, "Then I will let you go." I said, "Mr. Haggerty?" He said yes. I said, "Did the envelope contain what you expected?" He did not say anything for a long time. The line was quiet. I could hear his clock ticking. I could hear him take a sip of something. Then he said, in a voice I had never heard from him, a voice that was not the careful lawyer voice, a voice that was a little tired and a little old, "No, it did not." I said, "What did you expect it to contain?" He did not reply. I said, "Mr. Haggerty." He said, "Your grandmother told me in 1977 that the envelope contained the name of a boy." I said, "Yes." He said, "I expected it to contain a name." I said, "It did." He said, "And what was the name?" I said, "Esteban." He did not say anything. I said, "He is a math teacher in El Paso." He did not say anything. I said, "Mr. Haggerty." He said, "I am here." I said, "The envelope contained a math teacher in El Paso." He did not reply. I waited. He did not reply. I said, "Thank you, Mr. Haggerty." He said, "You're welcome, Marisol." He said, "Take care of yourself." He said, "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." I said, "I know." He said, "I am sorry for your loss." I said, "Thank you." He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. I want to tell you what I think the lawyer was trying not to say. I think Mr. Haggerty, who has been practicing law in Albuquerque for 50 years, who has read 1,000 wills, who has held 1,000 secrets in his safe, was trying to say that the envelope changed him too. Not in the way it changed me, not in the way it changed Esteban, but in the small, slow way that a piece of paper, sealed in red wax, sealed in a safe, sealed in his memory, can change a person who is paid to keep things. I think he had been waiting, all those years, for someone to call and tell him what was inside. I think he had been afraid, just a little, that no one ever would. I think, when I called him and said the envelope contained a math teacher in El Paso, he understood, for the first time, what he had been holding for 47 years. I think it was not what he expected. I think it was not what Lupe had told him either, all those years ago, when she had walked into his office and asked him to lock the envelope away and not open it until the right person came. I think the lawyer is still carrying his own small piece of the secret, and I think he will carry it until he dies. And I think that is its own kind of quiet revenge on the woman who paid him to keep it. The envelope is back in Lupe's kitchen, in the drawer where she kept it for 47 years. My mother has not moved the drawer. The wax crumbs are in the saucer. The letter is in a fireproof box in my apartment. The rosary is around my neck. The phone number for Esteban is in my phone. I have called him twice since May. He has called me once. We do not talk about the letter, or the rosary, or the fear. We talk about the weather, about work, about a cat named Gauss. He told me the cat had gotten out last week, and then had come back the next morning, and had sat on his chest and purred. I said, "That is a good cat." He said, "That is a good cat. I am 28. I am the only one in my family who knows. I am the only one who has met Esteban. I do not know if I will tell my parents. I do not know if I should. I do not know if there is a version of the truth that would not hurt them or a version that would hurt them less. I have decided for now to wait. I have decided to carry this the way Lupe carried it, in a quiet drawer, in a quiet house, in a quiet life, until the right person comes on Sundays, or until I am too old to carry it, or until I am not afraid anymore. The envelope was sealed for 47 years. The rosary was split for 47 years. The boy was safe for 47 years. The secret lived in a kitchen drawer in Albuquerque, in a lawyer's safe, in a single sheet of blue-lined paper, in a small slanted hand, in a 3-line letter, in a wax seal with an L pressed into it. And it waited. It waited for me. It waited for the one who came on Sundays. It waited for the one who had earned it. And now I have it, and I am 28, and I do not know what to do with it yet, and I think that is okay. And I think that Lupe would have understood, and I think that the lawyer, Mr. Haggerty, is still sitting in his office on the 3rd floor of a beige building downtown, with a clock on his wall and a phone he is not going to pick up, and a memory of an envelope that changed the shape of a family without anyone noticing. I think about Esteban, too. I think about the white pearl in his rosary, and the math textbook on his table, and the cat on his chest, and the way he had said, "I will be the one with the math textbook on the table," and I think he is, in his own way, a piece of Lupe that got loose, and that got to be a man, and that got to teach math to high schoolers in El Paso, and that got to live a quiet life, and that got to keep the other half of a rosary that his mother had soldered together in 1977. I think that is the revenge. I think it is a beautiful one. I think it is the kind of revenge that only works if it is quiet. Thank you for staying with me through this one. I know it was a long one. I know some of it was hard to sit with. If you have a family secret or a story that has been passed down in your house in pieces, or a question you have never asked, I would love to hear it. Leave it in the comments or save it for yourself or tell it to someone you trust on a Sunday. The story we just heard is a reminder that the people we love the most are usually carrying more than they let on, and that the things they leave behind in drawers and in envelopes and in rosaries are not always what we expect. If this story sat with you, leave a like so more people can find it. And subscribe if you have not already, because the next one is going to be just as heavy in a different way. Take care of yourselves. Drive safe. I'll see you in the next one.